The need to change our way of thinking. First of all, it is necessary to know the laws of Gnostic esoteric work. That is, if we indeed want a radical and conscientious change, in the name of truth, we will state that if there is any place where we must begin to work on ourselves, it has to be in relation to the mind and the emotions. It would be absurd to begin working with the motor center, for example, which, as you already know, is related to the habits and customs and actions of such an organ or center. Obviously, this would be like beginning an absurd fakirism. Incidentally, speaking of fakirs, there are fakirs in India who raise an arm vertically, for example, and maintain it in that position for an indefinite period of time until it becomes rigid. There are also others who remain in the same place for 20 to 30 years until they become statues. And after this, just what is gained by these fakirs? Obviously, they develop some willpower. We cannot think that they create the body of conscious will, however. Definitely not. It is impossible to create any body outside the ninth sphere of sex. If it were possible to create any body in the absence of the ninth sphere of sex, we would then have to be born of air in some lake or from a rock. We would not be children of a man or of a woman. Therefore, creation occurs in the ninth sphere. That is obvious. Thus, no fakir can create the body of conscious will away from the ninth sphere. Nothing is gained, therefore, by those who dedicate themselves to fakirism, except the development of some willpower. Thus, to begin with the motor center would be absurd. To start working with the sexual center without having the correct information about the body of the Gnostic doctrine is even worse, because one who begins under such conditions does not know what he is doing. He or she does not have a clear consciousness of the work in the forge of the Cyclops. Obviously, he or she cannot, or rather can, commit grievous errors. Let us remember that the first center is the intellectual center, and the second, the emotional center. The third is the motor. The fourth is the instinctive, and the fifth is the sexual center. And of course, we've mentioned in previous lectures that the fourth and fifth are sometimes put together and categorized as one motor center or motor instinctual sexual center. There also exists the sixth center, which is the superior emotional center, and even the seventh, the superior mental center. But if we do not truly begin with the inferior centers of the human machine, we will commit many errors. Before anything else, we should begin these studies with the intellectual and emotional centers. We need to truly change our way of thinking, otherwise we will follow erroneous paths. Of what use would it be, for example, for you to attend these classes but not change your way of thinking? Here we give you esoteric exercises and you are guided in the doctrine. But if you do not change your way of thinking, of what purpose is all that you are being taught? You are told that we have to discuss the ego, that we have to sacrifice ourselves for humanity. You are told that we need to create the superior existential bodies of the being. But if you continue thinking as before, with the same mental habits of former times, of what purpose is all that you are being taught, that you are listening to right now? You were told that you must disintegrate your ego, yet you continue with your old mental habits, with your senile forms of thoughts and systems of thinking. Therefore, of what use is all this information that you are being given? The sacred scriptures clearly speak about old wine and new wine. Christ said that no one would pour new wine into an old, hardened leather flask, because the old container would burst. Therefore, one needs a new, pliable container for storing new wine. The great Kabir Jesus also said that no one would think of mending old clothes with pieces of new cloth. It is unthinkable, for example, to tear a new suit and to mend an old one. That would be absurd, would it not? To create a new suit out of old material and to rip apart a new suit for no reason. So in the same manner, new teaching is like new wine and needs a new flask or storage container. And what is this container? It is the mind. If we do not abandon our senile forms of thought, if we continue thinking according to the habits we once had, then we are simply wasting our time. We need to change our way of thinking. For new wine, we need new containers. Thus, we must completely change our way of thinking in order to receive the teaching. This is the heart of the matter. Because if we receive the teaching and merely add it onto our old way of thinking, into our previous habits, then we are truly doing nothing. What are we doing? Instead, what we are doing is fooling ourselves. If we attempt to hook the car of the Gnostic teachings to our old car, beaten by time, full of filth and worldliness. First of all, a container must be prepared to receive the wine of the Gnostic teachings. The container is the mind. Only in this manner, through a new, transformed mind, can one receive the wine of the Gnostic teachings. This is what I need all of you brothers and sisters to understand. We need to eliminate our negative emotions, because these negative emotions prevent a true radical inner change. It is possible to transform ourselves if, deep within us, we still possess it is impossible to transform ourselves if we still have negative emotions. We must eradicate from our hearts those negative types of emotions that are truly damaging in every sense. A person who allows themselves to be carried away by negative emotions becomes a liar through and through. In this way, negative emotions turn one into a liar. Pay attention to yourselves, to the way you lie, or make false judgments, and then regret doing so. But by then, it's already too late. Therefore, we must eliminate negative emotions from our nature. Lies are certainly false connections, because through them we weaken the Father's energy, the life of the Ancient of Days, that is to say, our profound inner being, which flows through the inner cosmic organization until it reaches the mind. If we make a false connection, that energy can no longer flow. It is as if an electrical wire were cut, then the electrical energy does not reach the bulb that would otherwise give us light. In this manner, lies and deception, as I have said, and I repeat, are false connections. When one is young, one is full of negative emotions and one becomes a liar. That is the crude reality of facts. If we truly understand this and begin to change our way of thinking and feeling, very soon this will be reflected within ourselves. Once one has changed one's way of thinking, feeling, and acting, then one is perfectly ready to begin working on the mysteries of sex. We would be committing a serious error if we allowed people to start working within the ninth sphere without even knowing this body of the doctrine. That would be absurd, because people who have not changed their way of thinking, continuing with the same habits, and have the same way of feeling, who are victims of negative emotions, cannot understand the mysteries of sex without destroying themselves in the process. Why then is it not emphasized that one must first learn the science in order to then enter the ninth sphere of work? Philippus Theophrastus Ouroboros or Aureolos Aureolos Bombastus von Hohenheim. Oh my goodness. That whole series of names just for Paracelsus in brackets was right about this. Let us begin then by changing our way of thinking and feeling. Many receive esoteric teachings, but if they continue thinking as before, as they did 20 years ago, what do they expect? They are wasting their time. If the teachings have been given to people so that they may self-realize, and yet they continue thinking as before, then obviously they're on the wrong path. I know of cases in which some people have been in the Gnostic teachings for 20 or 30 years and still think the way they did so long ago, decades ago. Very learned, yes, they handle the theory well, but if one examines their habits carefully, one will see that they have the same habits they had before. And I know of others who are even judicious, who perform their duties, who speak about love in an excellent manner, who handle the body of doctrine in an extraordinary way. Yet, when one observes them, it becomes clear that they act just as they did before coming into Gnosis. They act as they did years ago. They retain the same old habits they had when they knew nothing of these studies. They continue with the same old habits. What then are these people really doing? Obviously, they are miserably fooling themselves. Thus, we must begin by changing our way of thinking and later our way of feeling. Pouring new wine, the Gnostic wine, into a new container, not into an old container, an old hardened flask. A senile mind full of old habits that go back 20 or 30 years is not prepared to receive the wine of Gnosis. A mind like this must forcibly undergo a total change. Otherwise, it will be wasting its time miserably. That people are asleep is not unknown in the Orient, but in the West, people believe that they are awake and nevertheless do things they do not want to do. They go to war, for example. They do not want to, yet they still go. Why? Because they are hypnotized. You know that if a hypnotized subject, for example, is ordered to go and kill someone, he will do so. This has already been taken into account in the penal codes of all countries on earth. This also occurs among people of all latitudes. They are hypnotized, yet they believe they're awake. If they're told that the time has come to go to war, they go to war. They do not want to, but they do it anyway. Why? Because they're hypnotized. This is very serious, terribly primitive. We need to awaken from this hypnotic sleep. That is true. But how do we awaken from this sleep? If we remain content with our mental habits, with our acquired customs, with our systems of reasoning, with our sentimental habits derived from family or heredity, then even if we listen to these teachings, we simply waste our time. So ask yourselves, why have you come here? For what purpose do you receive these teachings? If you were here merely out of curiosity, then it would have been better to not have come. If the desire to change has truly been felt, yet you remain satisfied with your old ways of thinking, then you are simply fooling yourselves. If you want to hook the car of Gnosis to your old codes, worm-eaten by time and rotten to the core, then you are playing a very foolish game that leads nowhere. Therefore, let us not deceive ourselves. You want to change. I know that. So let us begin by changing our way of thinking, then our way of feeling. Each one of us has our own way of thinking. Each one believes his or her way is the correct one. In reality, the various ways of thinking of each of us, or of everyone, contain nothing correct because we're all hypnotized. How can a hypnotized person think correctly? Yet you believe that you are thinking correctly. Herein lies the error. And I will add here in this lecture that this is why the reality that we live in with ego has to be subjective, and you could say in more Platonian or Greek terms, just relative. We live in the relative truth. We have to create our own truths, our societal truths, but it's all relative and it's all subjective. Mental habits are useless. If you truly want to change, you have here the new teaching. You have here the wine of gnosis, but please bring a new container for this wine. Do not the old one, not the hardened flasks. It is my intention to deliver the teaching clearly and seriously to all the brothers and sisters, and that is why I invite you to change your way of thinking. Have you perhaps reflected on the consciousness, on what it is? What exactly is it? Can we possibly compare consciousness? Is there a certain light that moves from one place to another? That much is obvious. One must learn to take advantage of consciousness, of where is it located. Wherever our consciousness is, that is where we are. You are listening to me at this point, but are you certain that the consciousness of each of you is truly here? If it is, that gives me the pleasure. But are you sure? It is possible that it is at home, or in a bar, or at the supermarket, and thus we are merely seeing the personality of such and such brother here. In this manner, wherever our consciousness is, our attention and awareness, that is where we are. We must learn how to place it where it should be. If we place our consciousness in a bar, it will act there. If we place it in a brothel, it will act there. If we place it in a market, we will experience either a good or bad market. Wherever our consciousness is placed, that is where we are. Consciousness is, unfortunately, imprisoned. A lecherous eye could take our consciousness to a brothel. A drunkard eye could take it to a bar. An envious eye could take it to some market. A party eye could take it to a friend's house, and so on. Perhaps it seems acceptable to you not to be able to guide your consciousness. I understand that it is absurd to take it to places where it should not be, and that is obvious. Unfortunately, I repeat, our consciousness is actually imprisoned and trapped inside the inhuman elements that we carry within ourselves. We need to break all the undesirable elements in which our consciousness is imprisoned. But tell me, are we able to do this if we do not change our way of thinking? If we are too satisfied with the senile and extemporaneous old habits that occupy our minds, would we perhaps even worry about awakening our consciousness? Clearly, we would not. If it is change that we want, let us begin now. Let us change our mental habits, our way of thinking. When one truly changes one's way of thinking, one can then transform one's interior. How can one claim to provoke a change in inner consciousness if one allows it to be carried wherever one's eye wishes to go? We really do not know how to handle this, and that is truly unfortunate. If we want to change, and a radical one at that, we must also learn about it, that which we call consciousness. In the Orient, it is said that before the bodhisattva is born, the bodhicitta must exist within us. But first of all, what is that which we call bodhicitta? I mean, we're going back to bodhisattva here. Some of you may know and others may not. Helena P. Blavatsky states that once one possesses the causal, mental, astral, and physical bodies, one is a bodhisattva. The human soul, the causal soul, dressed with these bodies is a bodhisattva. It is the human soul covered with the superior existential bodies of the being. In Mahayana Buddhism, bodhisattvas are recognized as beings only if they have sacrificed themselves for humanity through successive maha manvantaras. There are two types of bodhisattvas according to Mahayanic Buddhism. First, the pratyeka Buddhas, or rather those aspiring to become pratyeka Buddhas, never sacrifice themselves for humanity. They never give their lives for their brothers, and it is clear that they never incarnate the intimate Christ. The others are the true bodhisattvas, those who have renounced the bliss of nirvana for love of humanity, who in successive mahamanvantaras have given their blood for the sake of humanity. Although they could live happily in nirvana, they have renounced any form of personal happiness for the sake of their brothers on earth. They are the only ones who can truly incarnate the Christ. But let us return to bodhicitta. What is bodhicitta? It is the consciousness that is already awakened, developed, and transformed into the golden embryo. This is the true silver armor that can protect us from the powers of darkness and grant us wisdom and experience. So before the bodhisattva is born within us, the bodhicitta, the compassionate mind-heart, almost literally translated, must arise. That is the awakened and developed consciousness. It's a mind, it's a heart. The heart center is developed, it's a mind, and it's developed in an upright way where there's loving kindness and compassion. You can then see for yourselves the value of this gift called consciousness. It is a pity that mankind has, or rather, it's a pity that mankind has its consciousness imprisoned within the ego. And it is clear that as long as people continue to think as they do now, to feel as they feel now, and to maintain their old rancid customs, they will not be able to awaken their consciousness. It will remain hypnotized. Consequently, we can say that the bodhicitta will never arise. When the bodhicitta, the awakened and developed consciousness, surges forth in an aspirant, then a bodhisattva soon appears. Obviously, the bodhisattva forms within the psychological culmination of the bodhicitta. The bodhicitta is wonderful. My dear brothers, it is truly great when one genuinely changes one's way of thinking, because it is then and only then that one will work to awaken consciousness. Then and only then will one make the serious efforts that leads to the birth of the bodhicitta. And before this, it is not possible. We live in an unfortunately painful world. All of you are full of grief and suffering. Happiness does not exist in this world. It is not possible. As long as the ego exists, there will be pain. As long as we continue with our rancid forms of thought, we cannot be happy. As long as we are victims of negative emotions, any form of happiness is impossible. We truly need to arrive at happiness. We would not be able to obtain such a reward if we do not awaken consciousness. We will not awaken consciousness if we continue the way that we have been. Therefore, it is necessary to observe what we are thinking. Let us change our old-fashioned way of thinking and prepare new containers for the new wine that Gnosis represents. In this manner, we shall truly work. This world sustains itself through the laws of cause and effect, that is, the laws of karma. They're also called action and consequence. For example, such a consequence follows such an action. This is a very complicated world. It is a world of associations, multiple combinations, incessant abysses, battles of opposites, and so on. Under these circumstances, it is not possible for happiness to exist here for any length of time. Each of us must pay our karma. We are full of debts. This karma brings us more pain and much bitterness. Obviously, we will not be happy. Many people believe that happiness can be attained through the mechanics of evolution. This is a false notion because mechanics is mechanical. The law of evolution, as well as involution, constitutes the mechanical axis of the machinery called nature. There is evolution in the seed that germinates, in the plant that grows, and finally produces fruit. There is involution in the plant that degenerates and ultimately becomes a pile of firewood. There is evolution in the child that begins to form in the maternal womb, in the creature that is born, grows, develops, and lives in sunlight. And likewise, there is involution in the human being who ages, degenerates, becomes senile, and finally dies. That is all completely mechanical. The law of karma is also mechanical when viewed from the perspective of the 12 nidanas. What we need is to liberate ourselves precisely from the law of karma. We need to free ourselves from the mechanical movement of nature. This freedom is not possible through mechanical evolution. Mechanical evolution functions according to the laws of cause and effect, the laws of associations, multiple combinations, and so on. Whatever is mechanical remains mechanical. We need to free ourselves from the law of evolution and that of involution. We need to make a giant leap to enter the illuminating void, or cosmic consciousness. Obviously, there exists an antithesis between Albert Einstein's theory of relativity and cosmic consciousness, also known as the illuminating void. Whatever is relative is relative. The machinery of relativity operates through the law of opposites, in the battle of antithesis. There is pain, and that is not happiness. If we seek authentic happiness, we must escape the mechanical law of relativity. I was barely 18 years old when I attempted the giant leap to go beyond time and experience, that which is beyond time. The experience of prajna paramita in its most raw reality. It cannot be overemphasized that I had to repeat this experience 3 times. In the illuminating void, there is no conceptual dualism of any kind. The machinery of relativity would not function in the illuminating void, nor would the laws of mutual combination, mechanical associations, and the like. They are impossible in the illuminating void. All of Einstein's theories would be nullified in that realm. Undoubtedly, the experience of the illuminating void is not, or rather only possible in the state of samadhi, or, as it is known in India, prajna paramita. In the illuminating void, no form exists. One might say that one goes beyond the universe and even beyond the gods. If the illuminating void, in it, one could find a correct answer to the question, if the entire universe reduces itself to the unit, to what does the universe reduce itself? Such an answer is impossible for the logical mind, or at least for a mind that functions according to formal logic. In the illuminating void, however, such an answer is unnecessary, but it embodies a powerful reality in itself. All things reduce themselves to the unit, and the unit also reduces itself to all things. One penetrates the state of Mahasamadhi, living in all things, stripped of everything, and thus by itself is already wonderful, sublime, and ineffable. The illuminating void is only accessible through the deep, or rather great leap, and on the condition of having undergone total Buddhist annihilation. Otherwise, it is impossible. In those days, I had not undergone Buddhist annihilation, and as I approached the great reality, consciousness expanded immeasurably. without having completed Buddhist annihilation, I experienced unspeakable terror, which is why I returned to the universe of Einstein's relativity. I repeat, I experienced the illuminating void 3 times. There exists intuition of a transcendental nature. In the field of, or world of intuition, there are different degrees of intuitive perception. Undoubtedly, the most elevated intuitive degrees is that of philosophical, religious, or philosophical mystical minds. This type of intuition corresponds to prajna paramita. Such a faculty allowed me to transcend the world of cosmic consciousness, the illuminating void, to reach the great reality. I emphasize firmly that the path of gnosis leads to the great reality. It is beyond the universe of relativity, beyond the mechanical laws of relativity, far beyond even the illuminating void. In the meantime, it is necessary to undergo supreme annihilation so that the consciousness converted into the bodhisattva, the bodhicitta, and fully awakened can achieve this great leap into the illuminating void. I tell you, we must begin by changing our way of thinking in order to correctly work on ourselves. We could not conceive of awakening our consciousness and developing the bodhicitta if we had first not changed our way of thinking. It is necessary to know how to meditate, to understand the technique and purpose of meditation. What do we want to achieve through meditation? No one can have a peaceful mind and with the senile and extemporaneous thoughts they currently hold. No one can have peace in their heart without first eliminating all negative and harmful emotions. When a Gnostic Arhat submerges himself, he begins to work on the inhuman elements he has discovered through self-observation. Let us suppose he discovers anger. He will then begin to understand the psychic aggregate of anger with the help of his Divine Mother Kundalini. He will be able to invoke her and ask for her help once he has discovered the psychic aggregate of anger. Then she will set about disintegrating that aggregate so that in its place, love may be born. As we disintegrate all those inhuman psychic elements that we carry within ourselves, our consciousness will begin to awaken, because consciousness is freed through the liberation of the ego, or the elimination, the extirpation of the ego. Much has been said about sex and gnosis. However, we must first change our way of thinking in order to become more conscious of the teaching. Only in this way will we be able to work successfully in the lit forge of Vulcan.